Hello and welcome back to Scale War Machines and something a little bit different. This huge beast is a large-scale Agora Models replica of the iconic Mustang, specifically the Super Snake one-of-a-kind version in 1/8 scale. For those that don't know, Agora is the home of large-scale modelling, with a variety of references which you can build using a subscription model or by straight up ordering all the parts at once. In the past, these sorts of models were often constructed via Partworks magazines bought at the newsagents. One of my friends built a James Bond Aston Martin from another manufacturer, and I always remember what a powerful impact these big models make. Some time ago, Agora contacted me and asked if I wanted to build a kit on the channel. I was honest and said it wasn't really my thing, and I would likely never get around to building it. I enjoy the painting process way more than construction. So in discussion we agreed a way forward that will now become a short series which better matches my interests. The arrangement was they would send me this pre-production test build prototype which they had kicking around the office, and I could do what I wanted with it in terms of customization and painting. If you follow the channel, you'll know I like to make ratty vehicles, and so inspired by one of my favourite YouTube channels, Vice Grip Garage, and some of their rolling projects, I set about giving this Mustang a unique aesthetic in giant 1/8 scale. When the Mustang arrived, it was certainly impressive, and I quickly realised what a behemoth it was. Not easy to manoeuvre around the workbench at all. After giving it a quick check over, it was pretty clear some parts were broken, so I made sure to get a few replacements sent afterwards. Then it was unusually a case of taking the car apart, rather than building it, which was fun, especially as I was trying to work without any form of instructions. The plan was to break it down into manageable subsections for painting. It was fairly easy, and with a decent set of tools, it was quick to do. It's clear it's well made and a decent replica which works within the constraints of a screw-together construction format. Of course, as a result, these sorts of kits make detail compromises, but still have a definite authenticity and wow factor. It was quite interesting to see how it had been designed and put together. Only the steering box stumped me for a while until I got it figured out. With the Mustang broken down, I could set about fixing the damaged components, starting with the axle. The wheel had sheared off in transport and it had an irreparable split. Luckily, disassembling and extracting the rear axle was easy. This model is heavy, so a new axle was essential. This left me to assess the damage and remove the engine, which had some problems too. I trialled various solutions to recreate the underseal coating and superglued the broken upper wheel arch. It was interesting to note how the plastic parts had been primed first. The new axle was quick and simple to add, using the hardware from the original as a guide. And here we get to the first difference with this kind of modelling, and a question I will wrestle with throughout this build. How far to push realism? My instinct is to fill seam lines and joins. It's what I've always done, so I merrily began doing that with Tamiya putty. But ultimately the screw heads and locating holes will always remain. So it will have to be a balance between realism and the way the model is conceived. Either way, I will tackle whatever I feel is necessary to get a better effect, but I have to remind myself this isn't a working engineering model, nor is it a super accurate static 1/35th scale kit like I'm used to. It's certainly looking like a different approach is needed. I sprayed some parts to get a feel for how the paint went on and how I could proceed. However, the next step was one of the most radical and challenging. How to remove the markings all over the model. They seem to differ slightly, but are applied over the paint and are basically very tough decals or maybe stickers. I tried a variety of methods from Scotch-Brite type pads to razor blades, and they were certainly tough. So I escalated pretty quickly using the bonnet or hood as a test. I should say I had a spare bonnet on the go too, as a safety, so that made this decision slightly safer. The orbital sander and then later a mini drill sander were doing okay, but it was a pretty aggressive method. A bit of sticker remover solvent seemed to do a better job, with less mess and much less noise. I tested it gingerly first and then rubbed it over any trace of the markings. After final cleanup, the bonnet looked good. I decided to use the chemical approach on all the markings from then onwards. I applied a liberal amount, let it react, and then agitated and removed the markings. It was pretty fast and easy. For the boot or trunk and the roof, I had other plans involving keeping some faded markings. This meant I only attacked parts of the blue stripes I wanted to erode. I went carefully and took my time. This allowed a patchy, damaged paint effect to emerge. The roof was rubbed down first and then got the same treatment. As you can see, this part seemed to have some sort of extra lacquer coating. After a good rub down, the sticker remover was applied sparingly and then carefully cleaned up. The abrasive pads also help to remove any transparent edges or carrier film around the markings. Following a bit more sanding, the Mustang was starting to look suitably faded and sun-bleached. This was only the beginning. Now the fun really starts. To show primer beneath the damaged paint, I used some grey surface primer applied with my Badger Renegade Chrome airbrush. I just worked in gentle soft coats, trying to get a cloudy effect with feathered edges. Next up, I started on the rust, and this Mustang is going to get very battered and rusty, so if you're of a sensitive disposition, look away now. Using a technique scaled up from my smaller vehicles, I used Ammo by MiG rust shades of surface primer. The references are on the screen. The idea is to let the grey still shine through around the periphery. For this colour change coat, I'd switched to an Iwata Eclipse side feed airbrush. This is the first step in trying to show the sort of weathered and damaged paint you get when cars are exposed to the elements, especially the sun. I worked my way all around the model using the first rust shade with very thin coats. The Eclipse is a great airbrush for this kind of work, covering a decent range from fine detail to broad coats. After a quick blast with the hairdryer, I took it a step further. Using the spare bonnet to test it out, I stippled on more rust spots by turning the airbrush pressure way down. This creates variety and stops everything being too uniform. Spraying through a foam gauze also helps. Again, you can see me use this technique on my smaller models in other videos. I went a bit too heavy on the roof, but knew I could adjust it or even tone it down with other rust mixes over the top. This was done using some Life Colour rust shades from their Rust and Dust diorama set. Starting with their darkest reference first, I worked my way around the model and just let the creativity guide me. I was basically trying to build up more rust and patina as I went. I used mixtures of different colours and also types of paint coats. From thin misty coats to more speckled and splattered effects. I also started to add some rust streaks using my Badger Chrome airbrush. There'll be plenty more of this to come, but it helped me to develop the look in my mind. Any correcting or blending can be done using some thinners. More touching up and refining will be done in later stages. I started to think of a strategy for the chrome parts, and rubbing them down slightly with an abrasive pad seemed to be something which could work well. To add grime and shadows, I went with some water-based Vallejo model washes, which I freely applied by brush. I added them to various recessed areas and parts of the car that would collect muck. Like around the door jambs or kick plates. Although these products aren't really blendable like enamels or pigments, they can be easily adjusted or tweaked later on using Vallejo thinners. And this is progress so far. I'm pretty happy with it and glad I could skip construction and get pretty much straight to painting as soon as possible. The bonnet or hood was cleaned and prepped ready for paint, and I think I went with the spare one which I blasted with Chaos Black by Games Workshop. I love white vehicles with a black primered bonnet. I think the look really suits them, especially with that long shark nose like this Mustang. There are a couple of things to fix, but I'm pleased with the choice of black. So that's progress so far. Plenty more still to do and lots more destruction awaits this poor Mustang. I must say I probably couldn't or wouldn't bring myself to do this had I painstakingly collected and built up this pricey model myself. That said, it's certainly going to be visually different and will be a great barn find for someone one day. Here's a quick glimpse of what you can look forward to, including more destruction, painting and weathering, and I attack it with an angle grinder. I finally come up with a solution to make working on the Mustang a lot easier. And I start to inject some colour and aged and peeling lacquer, as well as some race numbers for our ratty ride. That's all for this video. I'll try and use this as an occasional series, as I know it's not necessarily what people come here to watch. I will likely intersperse these films with more figures and AFV models when I get the time to make videos. See you in the next video, and bye for now.
Subscribe for our latest videos.